Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about relationships. We're going to dive into the second pillar. So Gary's three pillars of Dungeons and Dragons are combat, interaction, and exploration. Today I want to talk about the interaction pillar, and I specifically want to talk about relationships: Platonic, romantic, and self. Okay. So as we delve deeper, we spent 48 years adding complexity to how we manage combat, and we have not even scratched the surface until the Strixhaven book on the interaction pillar. Right? How do we interact as thinking, feeling beings? Right? So I've been thinking about these relationships, and so let's focus on the player today. Right? So if we are a player, we have to craft relationships with every non-player character we come across, right? Now, the flow is there's two knobs first, right? The flow is every NPC we run across first, they're going to be the relationship is going to be platonic, right? Just the structure of culture. You have platonic relationships with someone. Then it's incredibly rare for somebody to fall in love at first sight, and even if you do, that can be incredibly dangerous because you don't know that person, right? So that's purely a physical attraction, and there isn't much more there, right? Like unless I guess it's possible to fall in love with someone if they're doing a certain thing that would endear you to them. So it is possible, but it's rare, right? So the vast majority of times when your player character runs across a non-player character, that relationship is going to start as platonic, okay? Then it has the possibility of becoming romantic. Now, I'll tell you right now, romance in Dungeons & Dragons has been pretty much forbidden for a long time. And really, okay, go find a story, a Dungeons & Dragons story, anywhere on YouTube or any other social media where they're like, hey, listen to this story about romance in Dungeons & Dragons, and it ended well, and I'll show you 100 that ended terribly, right? And the reason why is Dungeons & Dragons, it's been challenging. Dungeons & Dragons is only 48 years old. We've spent most of the time building a lot of rules around how to murder each other, right? Like in the game, right? And the reality is we really haven't built almost anything for how to talk to each other and how to interact with each other, right? We're just now crafting that complexity structure now. Amanda Heyman really, she put in befriend, a friendship mechanic in Strixhaven, and a beloved mechanic, which doesn't have to be, but absolutely can be used to structure a romantic relationship and actually give mechanical benefits from that, right? And mechanical benefits from friendship, right? Actual in-game advantages, no pun intended, for structuring, these romantic relationships. So we come and we interact first platonically, right? And then that can blossom into a romantic relationship, and then in the game, right? And then we need to manage that relationship, right? So that's two dials, right? And it is challenging. It is very challenging. And here's the self, right? So this goes so deep, and I love when people are like, "Oh, Scott, Dungeons & Dragons is a simple game." No, you're a simple person. That's all. When somebody tells you that Dungeons & Dragons is simple, it just means they're simple, right? Okay, so because you don't have to think too long before you find that Dungeons & Dragons is outrageously complex. So get this, right? Your player character, if you're going to transition from a platonic relationship to a romantic relationship, it's important first that you understand your relationship with yourself as a player character, right? Does your player character love themselves? Do they love themselves too much? Are they indifferent to themselves? Do they hate themselves? Right? You need to understand your player character's relationship to themselves before you can understand how they would transition from a platonic relationship to a romantic relationship. So for you to craft a flow from platonic to romantic, or from romantic to platonic, you have to understand your player character's relationship to themselves. Do they love themselves? Do they hate themselves? Are they indifferent to themselves? Is whatever they're feeling too passionate? Not passionate enough? Right? And only when you understand that player character's relationship to themselves can you start to think about transitions from platonic relationships to romantic relationships. One step further, as a player, if you don't understand your own relationship to yourself, that's interesting, right? I'm tempted to say you can't understand it for a player character, but that's not true. I actually think you may be able to build a path to actually understanding your IRL relationship with yourself by doing it first through a Dungeons and Dragons character. So the depth of it is you understand, you explore and think about your relationship to self for your player character. Once you've understood that, acknowledged it, and processed it, you can now transition from romantic relationships to platonic relationships, right? You can also craft variations of your platonic relationships based on your own understanding of your relationship with yourself as a player character, the player character's self. And you can also craft variations on romantic relationships, okay? And through that path, if you don't know what your relationship to yourself is, you may be able to find it after you've already done that activity and that exercise with your player characters. And last thing, pity the D&D-less. How do they explore their relationship with themselves, right? They don't have these models. They don't have more than one chance at it. And because we come at these multiple identities, it could be, single digits, double digits, triple digits, right, on characters, we just have this opportunity to look at this in the abstract and then bring this into action and then bring this into assertion and start the cycle again. Whereas the D&D list, people who don't play Dungeons and Dragons, people who haven't crafted multiple worlds, right, haven't crafted multiple identities, they may never ask the question, what is my relationship to myself, right? But Dungeons and Dragons puts us in a different space and says, move beyond your normal humanity, move into a higher intellectual and emotional evolution. That's where Gary pointed us, in my humble opinion. So, with this said, have you done this yet? Have you explored the relationship of self in the player character? And has that helped you understand your own relationship with yourself IRL? Or do you have a solid understanding of your IRL relationship with yourself, and that has allowed you to put more depth into your Dungeons & Dragons character? I'd love to hear your experience with this. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear yours. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.